Hello, and welcome to Joline Knits A Lot. This is my show about knitting and crafting and the things that I get up to here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. How are you? It's officially summer now, but we're having a sort of a cloudy, cool morning. So I have on my Marseille sweater. This is a sweater that I knit not too long ago. It's a design by Petite Knits, and I knit it using Sandnes Garn Double Sunday, which is a DK weight non-superwash wool. It's a very cozy sweater for a coolish morning, and we're looking forward to the sun coming out later today. We have had so much rain in the last week that everything is super green and very lush, but we could use a bit of sunshine now to balance out all of the rain we got. I don't know about you, but I have been very interested in knitting socks. And I guess there's a reason why a lot of people talk about the summer of socks or knitting a lot of socks in the summer. Partly I think because they're small projects that we can work on when we have a moment here or there. They're easy to carry. They're not hot as we hold them in our laps. But also right now there's a bunch, for lack of a better word, a bunch of really interesting sock patterns coming out. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that I'm interested in knitting. First, I'd like to show you a couple things I have off my needles, and perhaps surprising to no one, there are some socks. I did finish my husband's Harlow hat. If you can remember last time I was working on this, I had made one for myself. It's right here. This is the one I made for me in white and pinks. And this is the one I made for my husband. This one is using some Brooklyn Tweed Shelter, this navy color. And then the contrast color is a small skein of seconds from Spin Cycle Yarns. It is Dream State, which is their worsted weight yarn. And you can see I had enough blue to get up to here, and then I had to switch into another skein that had a bit of gray at the top. This is what the one side looks like. This is a reversible hat. And when you knit the hat, this is the side that you have facing out. I don't know that it's necessarily a right or a wrong side, but this is the side you have facing you while you knit it. And if you flip it inside out, you get the other color being more dominant. And the only real major difference when you reverse it is that the decreases look different. So you can see here on, maybe if we look at the one that I made for myself, on the side that you knit facing you, you get these very dominant decreased lines. And then on the reverse side, those decreased lines recede and they come away, and so you don't see them quite as strongly. So I am looking forward to seeing him wearing this. I haven't given it to him yet, but I think it's quite a cozy hat and it should keep him warm this winter, especially while we walk our dog Blue. So those are some Harlow hats. This is a pattern by Andrea Mowry, or Drea Renee Knits. It is the worsted Harlow, and I really enjoy knitting it. It is knit using brioche stitch, and so if you're a new to brioche stitch knitter, this is a pretty accessible pattern. The only tricky part was the decreases at the top, but Andrea Mowry does an excellent job of describing them, and I believe she has videos for all of her really tricky techniques. So if you're having a hard time just reading the pattern, you can look into her many tutorials that provide help in a video form. So those are some Harlow hats that I've finished. I knit up my June sock tubes. Did I show you these last time? I think maybe I did. This is a pair of 76 stitch socks for my 76 stitch. I'm having a hard time with that today. 76 stitch sock machine. The finished circumference is about 9 inches and it's stretchy. So these are for probably my husband. I did some contrasting toes in this navy yarn, which is a skein of Stroll by Knit Picks. So nothing fancy, but just some nice navy yarn. And then I chose just to use extra yarn from the ball to knit the heels and the cuffs. So these just have some contrasting toes on them, so you can see. And they're not very tall socks, but I think they're quite nice. This is a skein of Homespun House in her Super Sock yarn, and it was part of a Harry Potter my goodness, my mouth today, Harry Potter yarn club. And so this is called the Great Hall, so it's named after that massive place where everybody at Hogwarts eats together. So it's quite colorful and aged looking. I was sort of hoping I could find a really deep burgundy yarn for a contrast, because I thought that would look really nice with this yarn, but in the end I just used this navy and some of the original yarn. So those are my June sock tubes off the needle. And if you don't know, I had cranked out 13 sock tubes late last year and put them all in special little bags so that every month I could have a little sort of monthly knit along by myself. Every month had a sock tube that I could then turn into a pair of socks. And it's been really fun working through those tubes because I can't remember what's coming up next, and I don't remember cranking this. So it's always a surprise. And it's really fun because turning a sock tube into a pair of socks takes way less time than knitting an actual pair of socks all the way through. So it's very satisfying to have like a little amuse-bouche, if you will, to kind of clear my needles and get a little something off the needles. And now I have a nice big stockpile of socks ready for Christmas. So those were my June sock tubes. And the other thing I have off my needles this week is a pair of socks. I have been a big fan of Summer Lee designs. Summer Lee is a fantastic sock designer. I love the colors she uses. She often knits colorwork socks or socks with really interesting details. And the pictures of her socks are really, really inspiring. So a while ago, I had seen this pair of socks, or this design for a pair of socks, come across social media. They're called the Cider House socks. And I think these maybe came out in the fall. But I have been wanting to knit these socks for a very long time. But in my head, I thought that they would take a long time because they have a lot of cables. But really, they didn't. And so I have completed a pair of Cider House socks. Ta-da! These are so cute. I used a hodgepodge of colors that I have had lying around. I used some, I still have a stitch marker on here. I used some West Yorkshire spinners. That's my my cream color that I have been using a lot for heels, cuffs, and toes. That is this cream color. The red at the cuffs is a skein of Polka Dot Creek yarns in the strawberry colorway, I believe, that I picked up last year at the Prairie Fiber Festival when Polka Dot Creek Fibers was vending there. I just love them. If you get a chance, check them out. And so I knew it was going to be a really good red for this sock design. So I have had that in my stash for quite some time. This blush color is by Sassy Strings, and I picked it up at the Prairie Fiber Festival last year as well as a part of my Stephen West shawl along. And as with a lot of Stephen West shawls, this was from actually a couple of years ago because it wasn't last year, it was the year before that I knit this one into a Stephen West pattern. But with Stephen West designs, sometimes if they use 4 or 5 different colors, then you don't have a lot that's used. So you often have lots left over. And in this case, I did. I had at least a half a skein, and I know I've used this color in different patterns as well. So here is the cable design. It's knit from the cuff down, so it looks like this. And it's got the same cables on either side. And I was sort of assuming that this would take me a long time, but it really didn't. And I think partly because of the cable, there's a lot of interest. And so you just knit along and it keeps you going. It's a 7-row repeat. And I found that by using a stitch marker to mark the first row of that repeat, I could just count and keep track of my knitting that way instead of using a row counter. I like to be able to count my rows. I find that more reliable than using a row mark or a stitch like a row counter, a clicker, or the kind that you rotate. Often because I forget to click when I get to the end of my round or to advance my row counter. And so it's easier for me if I can just count the number of rows that I've already worked. I find that more practical, and I know that I'm not going to forget to click at the end of my row. Anyway, these very cute socks are finished and off my needles. I'm really happy with them. And the other day I was helping my younger daughter study for her finals that she has this week and next week. And she saw me knitting these and looked at them, and I said, no, they're not for you. And she said, oh, I was going to ask for them. So I might have to knit her a pair. I have a nice half skein of a pale blue color that I think she would like. And it would look really good with this red. So these are the Cider House socks by Summer Lee Designs. Summer Lee has an amazing collection of socks. So if you're interested in something that isn't a plain stockinette sock, I would check her designs out. She has cables, she has lots of color work. She doesn't do very much lace work, but there are many like small collections. So she has like some summer sock collections. She has some shorty sock collections. She has a collection, I believe, with baubles coming out soon. If you're the kind of knitter who likes to knit baubles. Baubles I find are quite controversial. If there can be a knitting controversy. I'm not a big fan of baubles myself. I think they just look kind of, they're just not, they're not for me. And that's okay. If you like baubles, check out her sock bauble collection, which is coming out soon. And she also has a book of knitted socks that she's been working on, and I'm very much looking forward to that book coming out. And having knit a pair of Summer Lee socks, I'm now like looking at her other designs, trying to figure out what my next Summer Lee design that I knit will be. More on that later. The only other thing I have on my needles lately is this very large experiment. It is my Crochet Granny Square sweater. And I think I've made some progress since the last time I saw you. I'm pretty sure the last time I saw you, I had just joined all of my Crochet Granny Squares, and it was looking very vest-like. Well, I have made some progress. I had to do some sort of experimenting to figure out what the best way to add knitting to crochet would be for me. And if you're interested in this project at all, I am compiling a video that sort of goes through the whole process of me putting together these squares into a sweater. And that video will come out, I think, in the next month or so as I continue to work on this sweater and get it finished. In that video, I'll go into much more detail about how I decided, well, how I worked things through, the decisions I made and why I made them. But I'll talk about it a little bit here because I think it is kind of interesting. It was interesting for me anyway. So I had put together all of these granny squares, and maybe I'll just pop in a picture here of what it looked like the last time. The first thing I did was add a ribbing because I thought that would be the best place to start in terms of transitioning from crochet into knitting. First, I just used a knitting needle and tried to pick up stitches along the bottom edge, and it just wasn't very clean. It wasn't a very clean look. The colors of the crochet were kind of popping through, and I didn't really like the way it looked, so I ripped all that out. And I thought, well, maybe what I will do is take my crochet hook that I'd used to make all my granny squares, and I'll just do a single crochet round. The top of a crochet stitch looks a lot like a knit stitch, and so I thought what I would do is after I had crocheted one single round of single crochet, I would just pick up those stitches with my knitting needle and knit from there. And that actually worked really well. I picked up 3 knitted stitches in every double crochet edge that I had. So let me just show you what that looks like. This is the bottom edge of my sweater. So in each of these sort of rounds of the granny squares because the bottom of this sweater is all half granny squares. So it's cut in half like this. Well, it's not cut in half, you crochet it that way. But so the bottom edge is a series of double crochets in each of these colors. So there was a blue double crochet, a pink double crochet with a bit of a gap in between the next cluster. So in that gap, I picked up 3 single crochets along this edge, all the way along. I had to make some creative decisions when the crochet granny triangles met each other, but I think that it came out quite nicely. I used a 4.5 millimeter knitting needle, and I knit a 1x1 ribbed hem for as long as I could take. 1x1 ribbing isn't my favorite. So I knit about 2.5 inches because I wanted it to be quite a substantial rib at the bottom. And then I did a sewn Italian tubular cast off. It's my favorite, and it gives you a very lovely rolled edge. As you can see here, the knit stitches seem to just continue over the edge of the knitting, and it's quite stretchy. So that's what I did for the bottom. Great, I had that figured out, fabulous. I thought I would use the same technique for the neckline. The neckline is slightly different because it has both those half crochet squares like these ones and a couple of full granny squares, as you can see. Oh, it's really hard to see in this color. There, that's better. So you can see here, this is the edge of a full granny square. So I did the same thing. Along the edge that had the half granny squares, I picked up 3 single crochets in each of those gaps. And then when it came to the full squares, I just picked up 1 stitch in the top of every stitch that I had along the edge of the crochet granny square. That worked very well. And what I did do was plan my knitting accordingly so that I had 1 stitch at the very bottom of the V, right here, because I wanted to do a central double decrease that allowed me to have this nice knit sort of finished edge right here going up the center. I did a knit 1, purl 1 ribbing, as you can see, again, same as the hem. And when I got to the bottom of this V, I did a central double decrease, which takes 3 stitches and turns them into 1. So in order to do a central double decrease, you slip 2 stitches knitwise onto your needle together. So they go, you slip them 1 and 2 together at the same time. Then you knit the next stitch, and then you slip those 2 stitches that you have passed over your knitted stitch, and that gives you a central double decrease. Because you're slipping those 2 stitches together, you always have this 1 knit stitch that sits on top. And that's the look I was really going for. I did that central double decrease on every round, and I knit, I think, 10 rounds of ribbing at the neckline. I did the same Italian sewn bind off, nice and stretchy, and that's my neckline. So I was feeling quite confident with myself. Blue's tired of hearing about crochet. I was feeling quite confident with myself, and I thought, okay, I will just do the same thing when it comes to the sleeves. Sadly, that wasn't going to work for me for a couple of reasons. When I was picking up stitches for the sleeve, as you can see, I had a similar combination as I did around the neck in that there is a half triangle and also a full granny square. That's all fine and dandy. But I was using a bigger needle. I was using a 5 millimeter needle because I wanted to knit the sleeve in stockinette. And stockinette is not the same as ribbing. I know this is shocking. But ribbing, if you have a look at particularly this 1x1 ribbing that I knit, you can see that the knit stitches really suck in together. And so you get way more stitches per inch than you do in stockinette. So you can see if I pull it apart a little bit, you begin to see the purl stitches. But if you don't, those knit stitches really do pull in right next to each other. And so I was going to have fewer stitches per inch when I was working in stockinette stitch, and I was using a bigger needle. So I started out doing the same thing, picking up 3 single crochets in every gap that I had, and then 1 along the edge of the crochet granny squares. And that left me with a really, really wide sleeve. It was just too big, and it was sort of gathering funny around the hole. So it was starting to look a bit like a puff sleeve almost. It was just too big for me. So after being in denial and knitting probably a half a sleeve, I realized the error of my ways, and I pulled it all out and I started again. And this time I picked up only 2 stitches in every double crochet stitch around the edge, and then again 1 around the bottom, 1 around each stitch in the bottom. And this has, I think, given me a much nicer, my dog is interested in my yarn, a much nicer sleeve. It's I think a better fit. It sits nicely in that gap, and I don't have any gathered or puckering happening, as you can see. So I'm a lot happier with that. But that was, again, trial and error. And now that I think about it, it makes sense that I needed fewer stitches because I was looking at a different stitch gauge with the stockinette and the bigger needle. So I'm really happy with how that's turned out. I knit plain for a little bit, and then I did a bunch of decreases. Again, all of this I describe a little bit better in my full video. But I knit to about 16 inches. So there's my sleeve. And then I did 2 inches of 1x1 ribbing and an Italian bind off. I have to say, I do feel quite accomplished in the way that that sleeve has turned out. I did have to do some trial and error to figure out the right gauge, and I did some short row shaping that, again, I will describe in the other video if you really are interested. But I'm really happy with how that's turned out. And so now I've started the second sleeve, and I think, again, it's really looking quite nice. I have about a half a sleeve knit. So this sweater will be done actually relatively quickly. And I'm actually really happy with how it's turned out, considering it started out as a pile of granny squares and a sort of harebrained idea that I could turn them into a sweater. I'm really happy to say that I think it's going to be quite a wearable sweater. It will be warm because the crochet part of this sweater, the body, is quite heavy. And the sleeves are a lot lighter and drapier. So I think it will be a warm sweater. And my 17-year-old daughter has said that she would like to wear it. So I take that as a win, as a mom. If your teenage daughter approves of what you're making and actually wants to wear it, I think I might be on the right track. Anyway, I think that I should have this sweater done in the not too distant future. And no one is more surprised than I that it has actually turned out in a somewhat successful manner. So again, if you're really interested in this whole process, I do have a video. It will come out in the next month or so. And maybe you are sitting on a pile of granny squares that you'd like to turn into a sweater. Maybe I've inspired you to play a little bit. Sometimes I think it's good to not know how difficult a thing might be because you're less scared to just jump right in and give it a try. And that's how I feel about this sweater. I didn't really know what I was doing, but that didn't keep me from giving it a try, and I'm really happy with the results. I have to say, when I started knitting in the days before YouTube, I didn't know that socks were difficult, or that some people found socks to be difficult. And so I went from knitting dishcloths to hats to socks pretty quickly because that's what I wanted to knit. And so I think if you're motivated and interested, nothing is hard. It's just a challenge, and challenges are okay. So that's my crochet granny square sweater. And that's all I have on my needles right now. But I have a lot of knitting plans. As I said, I have some plans to knit some socks, partly because there are a number of sock patterns right now that are really interesting to me. The first pair that just came out in this last week is one I think I was telling you about last time, and it's the Fairground Socks by K.F. Jones of the Bakery Bears. I'm gonna stick a picture right here of this very sweet pattern. Kay was looking for a way to use her self-striping yarns in a sort of somewhat interesting way, or to add texture or pattern to self-striping yarns in a way that didn't lose the appeal of the stripes, but gave some interest while knitting them. And I think that this pair of socks does that in spades. I really like Feather and Fan. I'm a big fan, and I love that this sock pattern incorporates self-striping yarn and feather and fan in a really fun way. So I had a scan through my stash and I found a lovely skein of yarn that I've had for quite some time that I really wanted to knit up. And this is a yarn by Tiny Human Knits. Tiny Human Knits dyes fabulous self-striping sock yarns. She used to live in Alberta, but she's moved to the east coast of Canada, I think New Brunswick, but somebody might correct me if I'm wrong. One of her more popular colorways that she has been dyeing lately again is the Dunder Knit Rainbow. Dunder Knit was a very popular podcast that I enjoyed watching. I don't know if she is podcasting anymore. She had a very, very specific color aesthetic, as I think a lot of people do. And they included a lot of sort of muted, earthy tones, mixed with sort of deep, rich colors. And so this is a skein of the Dunder Knit Rainbow, all skeined up and ready to go to become some Fairground socks. I'm excited about this. And I'm going to pair it with a skein of Polka Dot Creek in their peach colorway. Now this I used in last year's West Knit Mystery Shawl Knit Along, and I'm pretty sure it's called Peach. I got this at the Prairie Fiber Festival last September, and I think these two together are going to be quite fun. So that's going to be a pair of Fairground Socks by K.F. Jones. And speaking of Mr. West Knits, he surprised us all with a new mystery sock along. Mystery shawl knit alongs I think are pretty popular. He's been doing them, Stephen West has been doing them for a number of years, and he's not the only designer who does these. I have done mystery shawl alongs with Johi Locatelli, or Curious Handmade does them. There's a number of designers who do mystery shawl alongs. Casapinka is another one I've done mystery shawl alongs with. So what happens in a mystery knit along is that every usually week you get a clue, and in that clue is a portion of the pattern, not the whole pattern, just a portion. And so in a shawl, like for example Stephen West's mystery shawls, you never really know where it's going to end up. It could be any size or shape or go in any direction, especially with Stephen West. Now he's got a mystery sock along, which again is going to be released in a series of clues over 4 weeks in July. And the only thing we know is that you should use very contrasting yarns. I took that as a challenge, maybe. I think socks are a great place to play with color and to be bold, because colorful socks are very fun, and not everybody always sees your socks, and so it's a great place to play with color without feeling like you're committing too much to a crazy color palette. So I had a couple skeins in my stash that I've been wanting to use for quite some time. This is Woolmeise. Woolmeise is a German sock, a German yarn dyeing company, and they do great, super saturated, colorful yarns. This is their sock yarn, which I think is let me check. I was going to say 80-20, but I could be wrong. Woolmeise is known as a very hard wearing yarn, partly because it's got a very tight twist and number of plies. Oh, it is. It is an 80% merino superwash, 20% nylon base. And this is the turquoise colorway. Ooh, it's quite bold, isn't it? Especially in the light. Woolmeise skeins are extra large. They're 150 grams as opposed to the usual 100 grams. So I have tons of this yarn. I was looking for a contrast color in my stash, and I did have a cream skein, but it just didn't seem right. It just wasn't quite, it seemed sort of the safe play. So I went to my local yarn shop, and lo and behold, they had some lovely Leo and Roxy. Leo and Roxy is another fabulous Canadian dyer, and they are very good at colorful yarns, especially neon. Look at that. This is called Password, and this is their sock base. I should see what the makeup of this one is, shouldn't I? Leo and Roxy is also well known for their work sock bases, which is a marled black and white that looks a lot like the yarn you might make sock monkeys out of. They're great, fabulous, and I really love the look of those too. This is a 80% natural merino and 20% nylon. The color is called Password. It is very bold. And I love it. I think it's gonna be so much fun. Now, if I put these two together, let's put it the right way. Oh, isn't that fun? So we just need some contrast, and I think I've achieved that. The other really lovely thing for me and this color combination is that it's a very vibrant and bold version of the Ukrainian national flag. And my family immigrated from Ukraine to Canada in the early 1900s, a long time ago. But the Ukrainian culture in Canada was kept strong by the people who emigrated here. And so a lot of us do feel a connection with this part of the world. And so I'm happy to be using these colors to make some contrasting socks. Very bold. So those are my sock patterns or sock plans for the next month or so, I guess. Some lovely Dunder Knit rainbow lacy socks, and some who knows what's going to happen Stephen West contrasty socks. There are other socks that I'm interested in knitting, and so this is just the beginning of my summer of socks. But I do have one other pattern that has been interesting me, and I think I talked about it a little bit last time. This is the mini mock neck tank by Jessie Maed Designs. Now, you know Jessie Maed is a fabulous knitwear designer, especially when it comes to tanks and camisoles and that sort of, I guess that space in your wardrobe. Some lovely summer wear. And so I, again, looked through my stash and I had this, which may look familiar to you. This is another skein of Volmaiza. It's also the turquoise colorway, but it's in a slightly different base. This is their merino base, which is 100% superwash merino. This skein, again, is 150 grams, and because it doesn't have nylon in it, it doesn't lend itself well to socks, because the nylon really does strengthen wool, particularly merino, when it comes to socks, and makes them harder wearing. But because this doesn't have nylon in it, I didn't want to use it for socks. And so I think this tank top is going to be the perfect use of this beautiful turquoise yarn. I love the color of it. I think it's going to be a very fun summer knit that hopefully I'll get wear out of this summer and into next year. So this will be my Jessie Maed Designs mini mock neck tank top. And that, my friends, is my knitting future. Sorry, didn't mean to bump you. I am looking forward to knitting on some little things as the summer progresses, particularly through July. I don't know about you, but I am always sort of aware that in July and August is when designs come out for fall sweater patterns, particularly the Rhinebeck sweater. The Rhinebeck sweater is a sort of annual tradition. It's a design by Andrea Mowry, often using spin cycle yarns or magpie fibers or both. And I'm sort of excited to see what her design is for this year. I have participated in the Rhinebeck knit along in the last few years. I having never been to Rhinebeck, it's still a fun tradition to maintain, and I always try to wear that sweater to knitwear events I go to in the fall. Lately it's been the Prairie Fiber Festival in Lacombe, Alberta, as well as Knit City in Vancouver, which I do plan on attending this year as well. So it's fun to have a new fall sweater, and it's fun to take part in a knit along where so many creative people are using amazing and totally different color palettes to create the same pattern. That's one of the things I love about knitting, is seeing how other people combine colors to create the same thing I'm creating and get a completely different looking sweater. What are you interested in knitting these days? Are you knitting all the socks like I am? Are you still into summer knitting, lightweight knitting that you can wear on hot days? Are you thinking ahead to fall knits as well? I'm still planning on trying to fit in some more charity knitting. I was very fortunate to be able to attend the Craft for Yag roundup, which happened June 17th, I believe. It was a really lovely event. There was a bunch of crafters there, and it took place in a senior center where they had tables laid out all around the hall, and you could just go in and sort the things that you had made by the categories listed on the tables. So there was a table for preemie hats, there was a table for children's hats, there was a table for adult things, there was a table for pet things. And you could just walk around the room and donate the things that you had made on the appropriate table, but you could also see what other crafters had made. And it was really lovely to see the generosity and the amazing productivity of so many thoughtful and generous people. There are more than 800 crafters in the Edmonton area who take part in the Craft for Yag donation drive, and thousands of pieces of knitwear, crocheted things, sewn things were donated for people in need of warmth, in need of support, and in need of care. And so it was really nice to be a part of that and to be inspired by the makers who attended, and all of the many beautiful things that were made and donated. I was really touched to be a part of something so unique and special. There was a table sort of tucked in the corner where you could pick up supplies to make different crafty things. There was kits for different crafts that could be donated. One of them was a kit for a snuffle mat for dogs who are waiting to be adopted. And so I brought it home because I thought between myself and my two daughters, we would love to make a snuffle mat for a puppy who didn't have someone looking after them like we do. So I'm looking forward to donating some more things for the fall. I'm looking through my particularly superwash yarns because I think that is the most practical, particularly for children. And I'm looking forward to knitting some more things to donate. I hope in the next couple of weeks you find time to do the things that you like to do. I know I plan on knitting a lot. Take care, and I'll see you soon.